Today I'll be discussing to you chapter 3, which is the cell structures and their cell functions. So basically, the cell is a small unit of the body wherein there's so much information that you should need to know about them. Okay, so a cell is actually the basic structural and functional unit of life, and all organisms are made up of cells. It is also a highly dynamic entity, even though its size is really small. However, the function of the cell is voluminous or marami siyang functions. The functions of the cell include actually cell metabolism and energy use. It is also used for the synthesis of molecules that's needed by the body. It is also used for communication between other cells and also other organelles within the cell, and of course the reproduction and for inheritance. So the cell theory actually was developed when most of the scientists have started discovering about it. Okay, so the first one we have here, Robert Hooke, who discovered the cells in a cork in 1665. So yung cork, guys, kung mahilig kayong uminom ng wine, yung cork na ginagamit na pang cover doon, yun yung una nilang in-study. Okay, and then we have Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who first observed red blood cells, sperm, and actually called the cells before as animalcules. Okay, kasi they are very small, but then they have the ability to move around. Okay, and then we have here Theodor Schwann and Matthias Schleiden. So they stated that the cells are the elementary particles of both plants and animals in the 1830s. And then lastly, we have here Rudolf Virchow, who predicted in the 1850s that all cells come from cells. So with those discoveries that the scientists had, so they came up with what we call now the cell theory, which states that all living things are made up of one or more cells, and cells are the basic unit of structure and function in living things. So they have also indicated the principle of biogenesis. So it means natural beginning, di ba? Kasi when you say genesis, at the beginning, and then that all cells arise from pre-existing cells. Okay. So this is actually how a generalized eukaryotic cell looks like, an animal cell looks like. So you will be able to see there what are the inclusions of a nucleus. You have your cytoplasm, the cell membrane, and other membrane-bound organelles that's found in a cell. But apparently, there are actually two types of cells that are present in our environment. So the first one, we have the cell that have membrane-bound organelles. You call it the eukaryotic cells. Okay? And then, the cells that do not have membrane-bound organelles are what you call your prokaryotic cells, which are unicellular organisms such as the bacteria. And these are examples of the prokaryotes. Okay? So if you will notice, the difference of the animal cell or the eukaryotic cell from a prokaryotic cell or the bacteria, wala masyadong organelles ang isang prokaryotic bacteria, okay, or a prokaryotic cell. Kung sa isang animal cell, you will be able to see their nucleus, a nucleolus. Dito naman sa bacterial cell or the prokaryotic cells, the DNA is only seen in the nucleoid region. Okay, wala siyang nucleus, but it does have a nucleoid region. Okay? So apparently, ito kasi si prokaryotic cell, para siyang nag-aagaw na animal cell and plant cell. Why? Because 'di ba si animal cell wala siyang cell wall. But si plant cell meron siyang cell wall. And apparently si cell wall present din siya dito sa mga bacterial cells. Okay? So minsan yung mga prokaryotic cells before, they are also they were actually considered as parang kalahating animal kasi they have the ability to move like animals, and then meron din silang some characteristics of what you call your plant cells. Okay, like having the cell walls. Kumbaga, meron silang mga meron siyang parts na merong presence sa animals and the plant cells. Okay, and then you can see there that they also have Ang meron lang talaga sila is what you call your ribosomes. They have the cytoplasmic membrane, and then all else are already used for their movement, like your villi and the flagella. Okay? Unlike your uh, eukaryotic cell na marami pa siyang ibang organelles within it. Like you have your smooth endoplasmic reticulum, your Golgi apparatus, which are not found in your prokaryotic cells. Okay? So comparing the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, so the meaning of the name, so this is where you now apply your knowledge about using prefixes and suffixes, no? Ito kasing mga prefixes and suffixes na to when it comes to the sciences and the medical fields, napaka-useful. Okay? So pro means before, so karyon means nucleus. Kaya doon niya nakuha yung name niya na prokaryote, and then eukaryotes are U means after, and then karyon means nucleus, so eukaryote. So ibig sabihin lang yan, with the evolution of these cells, nauna talaga si prokaryote, which is basically 3.5 billion years ago. So sila yung mga unang types of cell na nag-flourish sa evolution of the Earth. And then, ang mga eukaryotic cells, nag-evolve na lang sila after 1.5 billion years. And then the size of the cells for prokaryotes are smaller and then larger in eukaryotic cells. And then unicellular lang si prokaryote, multicellular si eukaryote, so more complex siya. Ang organelles sa prokaryote are merely absent, and then sa eukaryotic meron. And then the location of the genetic information for the prokaryote, as I have said, it's found in the nucleoid region. And then for the eukaryotes, you have the nucleus. So this is also another important thing that you should remember, that the DNA structure of the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes are different from each other. For the prokaryotes, they are circular in shape, and then for the eukaryotes, those are not circular. Okay, they tend to bend, or they tend to form a cross pattern, no, para mabuo ang isang chromosome. And then the reproductivity strategy of prokaryotes are asexual, so meaning they can reproduce by themselves, while in eukaryotes, you have the sexual reproduction, wherein the male and the female sex cells are being needed for them to be able to reproduce. And then for the oxygen requirement, anaerobic for prokaryotes, and then for the eukaryotes, aerobic. Kaya nga 'di ba guys, yung mga prokaryotes or yung mga early species na na-found out dito sa, or na-discover, 'di ba? More likely sa kanila yung mga fossils nila ay matatagal na nag-rot, okay? Kasi nga anaerobic, they don't really require don't really require oxygen. Kaya minsan mas madalas na ang mga prokaryotes talaga, even without the presence of oxygen, they are still able to reproduce. Okay? So let's go now to the different cell structures. So we define those cell structures as organelles, wherein they specialize in and perform in different specific functions. So you have your examples like the nucleus, the mitochondria, and the ribosome, so etc. So later we will be discussing them one by one for us to be able to know their specific functions. And then next, another important part of your cell would be your cytoplasm. This is the jelly-like substance that holds the organelle. So para siyang water sa swimming pool, okay? Kumbaga, just imagine that you have a swimming pool, and then maglagay ka ng kahit anong gamit dun sa swimming pool. Yung water dun, that's the cytoplasm, and then yung mga nilagay mong gamit will be the organelles. So ganon ang structure ng isang cell. So, next we have the membrane. Okay, kung meron tayong swimming pool, so ibig sabihin yung membrane, yun yung nakabalot, or yun yung pinaka-base ng ating swimming pool. Okay, so this is the outermost component of the cell, and then its function would be a selective barrier. Bakit siya selective? Kasi hindi lahat basta-basta pwedeng pumasok, at hindi rin basta-basta lahat pwedeng lumabas. There are certain processes for the travel of molecules going in and out of the cell. And then it also encloses the cytoplasm. Syempre kapag walang enclosure, of course, your cytoplasm will just spill out. And then walang mag-handle or walang hahawak dun sa mga organelles na yun. And then it also allows nutrients to enter the cell and waste to be removed. So when materials are found outside the cell, you call it extracellular. But when materials are found inside the cell, you call it now intracellular. Okay? So remember those prefixes. You have extra and intra. Okay? So for the structure of the cell membrane, let us always remember that this is called a fluid mosaic model. Okay? So the membrane contains of phospholipids, cholesterols, proteins, and carbohydrates. It is a bilayer, so double layered siya, and it contains two regions which include the polar and the non-polar regions. So the phospholipid structure looks like this. Again, sinabi ko na to with my previous na lecture sa inyo that the polar region or the head region contains a phosphate-containing group and it is hydrophilic. So it means it's water-loving. Okay lang na madikitan siya ng water. Okay? And then you have the non-polar regions or the hydrophobic region which are made up of fatty acids. As we all know, fatty acids don't really mix up with water, right? Like yung common oil, 'di ba? Hindi naman sila nagmi-mix talaga with water. That's a characteristic of fatty acids. So we call them now hydrophobic or water-fearing parts of the phospholipid structure, and these are the tails of the phospholipid structure. So non-polar region siya. So this is actually how it looks like. Kung makikita nyo, yung nasa labas, yung mga blue na heads, no? And then the bottom part, yun yung mga heads din. And then in between are the tails. So basically, hindi sila exposed sa water, may it be extracellularly or intracellularly. And then you'll be able to see their carbohydrate chains. You also have your proteins, membrane proteins, yung mga nakikita nyong violet and red na proteins, okay? And then you also have there your cholesterols and then the cytoskeleton which are important in the rigidity of your cell, okay? So yung nakikita nyo dito sa baba na histological process, I think you'll be able to see this as well in your APR. Okay, so just study how the cell membrane looks like doon kasi mas malaki yung or mas madedetermine nyo ng maigi yung mga parts. Okay, using the APR module. So let's go now to the different organelles. Now you have your nucleus, which is the largest organelle in the cell, and it is in the most inner compartment of the cell. It contains a chromatin or the DNA and genetic information on strands called your chromosomes. And basically, the nucleus is the control center for cell metabolism and reproduction. So your chromatins actually direct how to make proteins in your cell. And then you have your nucleolus, which is found inside the nucleus. And this is where this is the site where ribosomes are made. Okay. So the ribosomes, okay, they are the protein factories. They make up RNA and protein. So, kumbaga sa isang business, meron tayong mga tinatawag, merong mga structure like your factories na nagpo-produce, okay? And then you have your, again, cytoplasm, which is a cell-like fluid which suspends your organelles. You also have your endoplasmic reticulum, which is an extensive network of membranes. So, etong endoplasmic reticulum, the only difference they have is if ribosomes are stick to them. So if ribosomes are present, you call it the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And if there are no visible ribosomes, you call it the smooth. Okay? And then, kung meron tayong ribosomes, which are the factories, of course, we also have deliverers like your Golgi apparatus. So it sorts the proteins made the ribosomes and they are being sent to the different places in the cell. Okay? So, kung meron din naman tayong mga deliverers, meron din naman tayong tinatawag na mga lysosomes which tend to be the, kumbaga sa ano is mga nambabasura, okay? Yung mga collector, garbage collector in our terms. So, these are organelles that are filled with digestive enzymes to remove waste and invading bacteria. And then you have your mitochondria, which is always referred to as the powerhouse of the cell, because this is where your energy is being developed or being made. And this converts the energy stored in glucose into ATP. And then, of course, you also have your vacuoles, which are fluid-filled organelles that are enclosed by a membrane. So they store materials such as food, sugar, water, and waste product. Okay? So kung meron tayong mga garbage collector, meron din tayong tinatawag sa isang factory na storage facility. So kung sa mga storage lang, it's the duty of your vacuoles to keep them. And then next, you have your cytoskeleton, which gives the internal framework of the cell. It consists of protein structures that support the cell, hold organelles in place, and enable the cell to change its shape. So these protein structures include your microtubules, your microfilaments, and your intermediate filaments. So for the microtubules, it helps to support the cytoplasm of the cells, assisting in cell division and forming essential components of certain organelles such as your cilia and your flagella. Okay, so sa microtubules, more likely they are related to structures which are for movement, okay, and propulsion. Next, you have your microfilaments. They are small fibrils formed from protein subunits that structurally support the cytoplasm, cell movement, and determining the cell shapes. So, ito yung mga mas maliliit. And then you have your intermediate filaments, which provide mechanical support to the cell. So, a specific type of intermediate filament is keratin, a protein associated with the skin cells. So this is actually how they look like. Kung mapapansin nyo, si microfilament, it's very thin but it's very long. Pero naman si microtubules, it's short but it's packed. Okay? Kumbaga mataba siya. And then you have your intermediate filaments na they are intertwined with protein subunits. Okay? Next, you have your centrioles. This is where microtubule formation occurs. Each centriole is small, cylindrical organelle composed of microtubules and is involved in the process of mitosis. And then you have your cilia, which project from the surface of the certain cells. They are responsible for the movement of materials over the top of the cells, such as your mucus. So, more likely makikita natin itong mga cilia na to like sa ano natin sa tenga o kaya sa ilong. Okay? And then flagella, this is the structure similar to that of the cilia but are much longer, and they usually occur only in only one per cell. So it aids for movement like in your sperm cells, na isa lang ang flagella nila. Okay? But there are certain times that kapag may nagkakaroon ng abnormality when it comes to the development of sperm, minsan nagde-develop sila ng dalawa or tatlong mga flagella. Okay? Next, you have your microvilli. These are specialized extensions of the cell membrane that are supported by microfilaments. They do not actively move as cilia and flagella do, and they are actually numerous on the cells and have them increase the surface area of those cells. They are abundant in the surface of cells that line the intestines, kidney, and other areas in which absorption is an important function. Okay. So this is just a summary of all the organelles that can be found in a cell. So just read up on them na lang. Okay. So the whole cell activity, it is characterized and determined by the type of proteins being produced. And the proteins being produced are in turn determined by the genetic information in the nucleus. So information in DNA provides a cell with a code for its cellular processes. Sabi ko nga sa inyo guys, ang production kasi ng ang duplication kasi or ang pagpaparami ng cells kasi nagdedepende yung function nila kung ano yung genetic code na sinesend from the nucleus. Okay? So, for example, the nucleus produces a certain protein, okay? Hindi porket yun na yung protein na yun, ganun na talaga siya. What happens is that kapag ka de-develop yung protein na yun or yung cell na yun, meron na siyang kaakibat na code na tinatawag. So eventually when growth happens, no, yung code na yun yung parang nagiging way para ma-determine kung anong klase ng cell siya mag-grow. So usually kapag ang cell nare-reproduce, para lang siyang general cell, okay? Pero upon growth and development, nagbabago siya. So for example, si cell nag-produce ng isang cell sa katawan. Pwedeng yung cell na yun is para pala sa pag-grow ng hands, pwede pala na yung cell na yun is pang-grow ng legs, pwedeng pang-grow ng eyes. So ibig sabihin meron tayong tinatawag na differentiation. Okay? So from generalized cell, magiging siyang specific after development or during the development. Okay? So that depends on the code being provided or the information being provided by the DNA. So the DNA actually contains the information that directs the protein synthesis, and this is what you call the gene expression. So ito yon. Once the genes are already expressed, of course, after that, dun mo na malalaman kung anong klase or anong type of cell yung dinedevelop sa loob ng katawan mo. So a DNA molecule contains of nucleotides joined together to form two nucleotide strands, and these strands are connected and resemble a ladder that is twisted around its long axis. So each nucleotide consists of 5 carbon sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. So katulad nung diniscuss ko sa inyo with nucleic acids. So ito na yon, yung carbon sugar, phosphate group, ito na yung pag-join ng guanine and cytosine, thymine and adenine. So ito na yung part na tinatawag nating mga nucleotides. So each nucleotide on the DNA strand has specific bonding pattern to another nucleotide on the opposite strand. Yun yung relationship of the purines and the pyrimidines. And then a gene is a sequence of nucleotides that provide a chemical set of instructions for making a specific protein. Okay. So guys, kasi when it comes to sa mga proteins, okay, sa pagbubuo ng mga proteins, we have what you call your codons. Okay, so yung codons na yon, that can be that is actually 3 pairs. Okay, I mean three bases na considered as one group. So for example, di ba, ang bases natin is your cytosine, guanine, thymine, and adenine. So may it be CGA, TCG, AAA, that's what you call a codon. Basta tatlong bases sila, that's what you call codon. And then, ang protein, nabubuo kasi siya with a combination of different codons. Okay? Pero kapag ang codon mo ay isang stop codon, okay? Ibig sabihin yung pag-grow ng protein mo or paggagawa ng protein mo, stop na. Okay? So your stop codons are actually tatlo. You have your UAG or the UAG. You also have your UGA or your UGA. And then you have your UAA or UA. Okay? That's UAG, UGA, UA. Okay? So kung mapapansin nyo dun sa stop codon, bakit may U? Di ba sabi ko kanina ang mga bases natin is CGTA. Okay? So yung U kasi guys, mapapalitan kasi ang thymine in the process para maging uracil siya. Okay? So kailan ba nangyayari yung changes na yon? So let's talk about the gene expression. So the gene expression is a protein that involves transcription and the translation process. But before the transcription and translation process happens, first we have what you call your replication or duplication stage. Okay? So dun sa duplication or replication stage, ibig sabihin lang nun, we tend to copy a certain gene. Okay? Or a certain gene. So ang ginagawa ng katawan natin is kinakopy niya yun as is. Okay? So, kapag ka nakopy na yung gene na yon, what happens is you now move forward to the transcription phase. Sa transcription phase naman, it involves the copying of the DNA. Okay, from the copied DNA, you will now transform it to a messenger RNA or an mRNA. Okay? So again, yung DNA na dinuplicate or ni-replicate, i-change siya to mRNA through the process of your transcription. Okay? Once transcription happens, you now undergo translation where it involves the messenger RNA, so yung product ng transcription, and it's being used to produce a protein and occurs in the cell cytoplasm after mRNA has exited the nucleus through the nuclear pores. So ito na yung papalitan mo na sa mRNA into protein. Okay, so that's DNA to mRNA, mRNA to protein. Okay? So, yung pag-move na yon, guys, yung the changing of your thymine to uracil happens during the translation process. Okay? Kasi dun sa translation process na yun, again, dun mo na babago yung conformation ng messenger RNA mo. So instead of you having the typical CGTA combination, thymine is being already differentiated into a uracil. Okay, kaya nagkakaroon na tayo ng stop codons. You have your UAG, UGA, and UA. Okay, UAG, UGA, and UAA. Okay? So, yun yung mga stop codons. Diba, dun sa previous ko sa inyo na lecture, paano ba ginagawa ang codons? Diba, para siyang beads. Okay? So, yung mga beads na yun, those are the proteins. Pero kapag yung tatlong codon na dumikit dun sa huli na, dun sa end ng protein na dinedevelop mo, it means tapos na yung production ng protein na yon. So, that definite length, kung ano mang length nun at kung ano mang codons yung nandun sa mismong protein na yon, that will define now what type of protein it will be. Okay? So marami tayong numbers of proteins na pwede nating or codons na pwede nating ma-produce. Okay? When it comes to when it comes to the production of your proteins. Naiintindihan ba yung gene expression? May question? Wala naman?
Wala naman po.
Let's move on. Now, let's go to the movement through the cell membrane. Okay, ito naman yung permeability, 'di ba? Sabi nga natin kanina, cell membranes are selective barriers. So, how does molecules move in and out of your cell through the cell membrane? So, the cell membrane has a selective permeability which allows only certain substances to pass in and out of the cell. So, such substances are enzymes, glycogen, potassium, are found in higher concentrations inside the cell. Okay, remember you have your enzymes, glycogen and potassium, which are higher in your or in the intracellular compartment of your cell. Substances such as sodium, calcium, and chloride are found in higher concentrations outside the cell. Okay, so later malalaman natin yung mga substances na to kung paano ba sila na-apply. And then the cell membrane passage, so some substances like oxygen and carbon dioxide can pass directly through the cell membrane's phospholipid bilayer. So ibig sabihin to pwedeng labas-pasok lang sila. Okay? Some substances must pass through transmembrane protein channels such as your sodium through its channels. So, kung meron tayong mga visitors na pwedeng labas-pasok lang, meron din namang visitors na kailangan dumaan muna sa isang channel before they are able to enter or exit the cell. And then the route of transport through the membrane depends on the size, the shape, and the charge of the substance. Di ba nga ang mga molecules natin, guys, iba-iba sila ng sizes, iba-iba din sila ng shape, and of course they can have a positive or negative charge na as their characteristics. So that also affects yung pagpasok at paglabas nila sa cell membrane. So some substances require carrier molecules to transport them across the cell membrane, such as your glucose. So later on, I'll be discussing more of the carrier molecules or the carrier proteins. And then some substances require a vesicular transport across the membrane. So pag vesicular, more likely your vacuoles or vesicles are involved in this passage, okay, or in this transport type. And then the vesicle must fuse with the cell membrane for a transport. So later on, malalaman pa natin kung paano ba nangyayari yung membrane transport using your vesicles. So this is just a summary of the different types and characteristics of movements across the membranes. So summary lang ito. So let's go to your diffusion. Okay, so the first one is you have your diffusion. It is a passive process, which means no energy is used to make the molecules to move, and they have a natural kinetic energy. So the example that has been given to us a while ago was your oxygen and your carbon dioxide. So they can just freely go in and out of your cell. So when you say passive, it means that it doesn't require energy for them to be able to cross your membrane. So for the simple diffusion, it requires no energy. Molecules move from area of high to low concentration, and it involves movement of the substances in a solution down a concentration gradient. Okay? So usually with diffusion process, meron tayong mga tinatawag na solvent and solutes, right? When you say solvents, yun yung it may be in the form of liquid. Okay? At kapag ka sinabi mo namang solute, usually solids sila. Okay? So mga solvent natin may be water, maybe alcohol, maybe oil. For your solutes, you may have there your usually mga ano sila, solid particles like your salt, your sugar. Okay? So with simple diffusion, it looks like this. Okay? Let's have the example of the diffusion of lipids. So basically, a dye is a lipid. So kapag dinrap nyo siya, usually buo siya, di ba? Pero kapag diffusion na or nagkakaroon na ng diffusion, kumakalat na yung molecules of your dye. And then eventually, when the dye is evenly distributed, of course, your solvent, no, becomes red, okay, in proportion to the dye that you have dropped in. Okay? So kumbaga nagiging evenly distributed na yung water molecules and your dye molecules. Okay? So for the concentration gradient, okay, sabi nga from high to low concentration, it is the difference in the concentration of a solute in a solvent between 2 points divided by the distance between the 2 points. So the concentration gradient is said to be steeper when the concentration difference is large and or the distance is small. Okay? So for example, you drop in a salt crystal, 'di ba, from kung solid siya, more likely it's highly concentrated. But when you drop it already in water, no, which is mas marami dun sa amount of salt ions or the salt crystals that you have, of course, the salt ions will eventually scatter in your solvent. So, ganyan yung nangyayari kapag diffusion from high concentration to low concentration yung nangyayari. Okay? Naiintindihan ba to?
Yes po.
So para lang din yung pagtitimpla ng kape or pagtitimpla ng gatas, 'di ba? Sabihin natin ang isang teaspoon of coffee kapag nilagay mo sa tubig, 'di ba? Yung coffee na yun nagdi-disperse. So hindi naman kayo iinom ng butil-butil na kape. So ang iniinom niyo na is already a mixture of the water and your coffee. So ganun din sa gatas. Okay? Kung sa kape kasi guys, 'di ba kapag titikman nyo ang butil ng coffee or the granules, 'di ba? Super mapait. Okay? That it does mean na highly concentrated siya. But once you mix it with water, nagkakaroon na tayo ng even distribution, okay, 'di ba? Parang yun na yung you mix it within your liking na yung the amount of water is already enough for the amount of coffee that you are putting in. So, ganun yung diffusion. Okay? So, kapag tinikman nyo yung kape, hindi na siya super pait katulad nung granules lang natitikman nyo. Okay? That you can also do it with sugar pwede rin sa salt. Okay, so ganun ang diffusion. And then next, we have your osmosis. So the diffusion of water across a membrane. So high water concentration to low water concentration. So it moves from water is attracted to the solutes like salt, so it will also travel to areas of low solute concentration to high solute concentration. Okay. So kung kanina yung diffusion from a high concentration to low concentration, ito naman si water. Okay, there is an involvement of water and solute. Okay. So ang pinaka-idea talaga of osmosis is where salt is, water follows. Kumbaga, kung nasaan yung salt, humahabol lagi si water. Okay? So the diffusion of water across membrane sa osmosis, it is across a selective permeable membrane from a region of higher water concentration to one of lower water concentration. And osmosis exerts a pressure termed your osmotic pressure, which is the force required to prevent movement of water across the cell membrane. Okay? So, paano ba natin pwedeng i-apply yung osmosis? Okay? So, for example, we have this also an inclusion, no? Sabi ko nga kanina, may solute and then may water. Okay? What if they are put in a solution? Okay? So, for isotonic, you have a solution whose solute concentration is just equal with the solute concentration outside. So, ibig sabihin, equal yung extra at saka intracellular nila. But for hypotonic, a solution whose solute concentration is lower than the solute concentration inside. It's lower outside, tapos mataas yung concentration of the solute inside. Okay? And then hypertonic, it's a solution whose solute concentration is higher outside, and then yung solute niya sa loob mas mababa. Okay? So, balikan natin yung idea ng where salt is, water follows. So, the osmotic pressure depends on the difference of the solution concentrations inside the cell relative to the outside of the cell. And again, they can be placed in different solutions, the hypotonic, isotonic, and hypertonic. Okay? So, ano ba yung nagiging direction of water movement? So, with isotonic, since balance yung inside at saka outside, of course, equal lang yung equilibrium. Water will follow in both directions, may it be outside or inside of the cell. Okay? Pero kapag ka-hypotonic naman, wherein the solution or wherein the solute is higher inside the cell, of course, yung water papasok sa loob kasi mas maraming salt. Okay? Cell, mas maraming salt sa loob. Pag sinabing where salt is, water follows, ibig sabihin si cell, hihigupin niya lahat ng tubig na posible. Okay? Para magkaroon ng balance. Okay? So, water is attracted to go to the solute inside the cell. That's what happens during hypotonic, when you have a hypotonic solution. Pero kapag ka-hypertonic naman, pag hypertonic kasi, the salt molecules are more or mas madami sila outside, so the water comes out, okay, from the cell. So let's have an example here, like your blood cell. Okay, so if you have a hypotonic solution, di ba nga, kapag hypotonic, marami yung salt sa loob at hinigop ng hinigop yung water, what happens to your blood cell is that nawawala yung definite niya na shape, and then eventually kapag masyado na siyang maraming naiinom na tubig, kahit naman tayo, di ba guys, feeling natin sasabog tayo. Okay, so there's a possibility of your cells bursting because masyado na siyang maraming water sa loob. And then kapag ka-hypertonic solution naman, so the water goes out of the cell. So kung walang matitirang water sa loob ng cell, what happens is that the cell decrease or shrinks. Okay, nawawala din yung shape niya and then nag-shrink. But with isotonic, since equal yung inside and then equal with the outside, the water can freely flow evenly. So, normal yung itsura ng cells or ng red blood cells. Okay? Naiintindihan ba tong osmosis?
Yes po.
Okay.
Yes po.
Okay.
So,
Yes po.
kapag ka-hypotonic guys, okay, you call it cytolysis. Okay, when you say cyto, that's cell, and then lysis means break. Okay, so hypotonic solution, ganyan yung nangyayari. More water, it burst. Pero kapag ka-hypertonic, you call it plasmolysis. So lahat ng water lumalabas. Okay, and then your cell shrinks. And then kapag ka-isotonic naman, it's just the same. You still have the same shape of your red blood cell, which has a biconcave structure and then circular. Okay? Yan. Okay, so ganito siya. The red blood cell changes in different solutions. Okay, so this is actually how they look like under the microscope if you check on them. Okay? So next, let's go to the three forms of transports across the membrane. Again, you have your passive transport. Pag sinabing passive transport, they don't really need to have the inclusion of energy for the molecules to get in and out of your cell. And then you have the active transport, which includes your ATP or the energy being produced by the cell for them to be able to move against their concentration gradient. So for the passive transport or the simple diffusion, again, it doesn't require energy, but it does move from high to low concentrations. And your example would be your oxygen or water diffusing into a cell and carbon dioxide diffusing out. Okay, so ito yung they can just freely pass through your cell membrane. And then when you say facilitated diffusion naman, this is the passage of materials aided by both a concentration gradient and a transport protein. Okay, 'di ba sa conformation ng ating cell membrane, you will be able to see their different types of proteins. So in facilitated diffusion, there's what you call your transport proteins wherein those materials can pass through. Okay, so the transport proteins are uh, enables the molecules to move from high to low concentrations like your glucose or amino acids. So diffusion through the cell membrane channels or the cell membrane includes different types of channels. So it actually includes first your leak channels, which allows ions to pass through your cell membrane constantly. And then you have your gated channels. They limit the movement of ions across the membrane by opening and closing. So kapag sinabing leak channels guys, parang ganito this is just an example no yung sa katulad sa facilitated diffusion. It's a type of channel wherein wala siya both ends of the protein are open for molecules to go in and out of the cell. Okay? So ganyan siya, open lang siya. Kumbaga nagsaserve lang siya as passageway or parang eskinita where these molecules can pass through. So that's what you call leak channels. But kapag ka-gated channels naman guys, you will be able to see there na maybe one of its end, more likely from the extracellular part of your cell, na meron silang harang. Hence gated. Okay? Pag sinabing leak, parang gripo lang yan parang nakabukas all throughout. Of course, lahat ng tubig magli-leak lang. But if there's a gate, okay, of course, you will be able to limit which molecules come in and out of the cell. Okay? Hence, gated ang tawag sa kanila. Okay? So, kapag ka-gated, yan, makikita nyo naman yung difference like the potassium leak channel, which is always open. And then for the sodium channels, they are usually closed. But when there are molecules that parang signals the gates to open, they will open and they will let sodium molecules come in of the cell. Okay? So, ito naman guys, this is actually an example of a carrier protein. Okay? Pag sinabing carrier protein, um, they tend to bond and drag molecules through the bilipid layer and release them on the opposite side. Okay, hence carrier, ibig sabihin, binubuhat nila yung molecules. Unlike the leak and gated channels, they are just embedded on the cell membrane and then pwedeng pass through and through lang sila or pwedeng they open gates. But with facilitated diffusion, para siyang it moves in and moves molecules in and out of the cell one at a time. Okay? So a certain protein facilitates the entry and the exit of these molecules. Okay? So, yung mga carrier proteins na yan, they are types of transport proteins. Okay? And then, of course, they also confirm then with the shape of the molecules that they transport or they carry. Okay? So, ganyan ang itsura nila. So, for the active transport naman, it requires you to have ATP or energy because they are moving against your concentration gradient. So, kumbaga, kung ang movement kailangan from kailangan mong pumunta sa opposite na gradient. So, for example, nasa high ka, gusto mong pumunta sa low, you would need to have energy for it. Okay? So, for the active transport, the most classic example would be your sodium-potassium pump. Okay? Si sodium-potassium pump kasi guys, usually, this is very useful when it comes to muscle contraction. Okay? And your muscle movements. So, may kinalaman to kapag kunyari, you had exercise and then pagod ka, you have fatigue. Okay? Di ba kapag ka nagkaka-fatigue guys and then you experience cramps after exercise, usually ang ginagawa natin is that um, we tend to eat potassium-rich na mga pagkain like your bananas. Okay? Pero kapag ka naman you have kasi 'di ba ano guys, yung potassium they relax your muscles. Pero kapag ka naman meron kang diarrhea, okay, wherein um, hindi relaxed yung intestines mo, you tend to drink sodium-rich na mga um, like yung mga Pocari Sweat, yung mga ganon, yung Gatorade, di ba minsan pinapainom yan sa atin? It's because we need to have more sodium. Kasi di ba, nare-release na lahat ng nagpaparelax ng muscles which is why your intestines are very loose and kaya kayo nagkakaroon ng diarrhea. So that is where your sodium potassium pump can be related to. Okay? So in your sodium potassium pump, okay, so you see there the inside and outside of the cell. Okay? So usually there are 3 sodium molecules pumped in for every 2 potassium pumped out and it creates a membrane potential. Okay? So again, kapag ka dumikit na yung 3 na sodium molecule dun sa protein and then phosphate kumbaga gives the signal for the gated channel to open, mag-open and then i-release si sodium and then papasok si potassium. Kapag na-detach na ulit si phosphate and then the potassium molecules are being released now inside of your cell. So, ganun siya. Okay? Ganun yung process ng sodium potassium pump. So for you to be able to memorize or to remember how the sodium potassium pump works, I have here a mnemonic, no? You have C3 na antuk in. Ibig sabihin, with 3 sodium molecules, there should be 2 molecules of potassium that should go in. Okay, nagegets ba yung citrina antukin?
Yes po.
Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
3 molecules ang kailangan for sodium and then ang equivalent niya para magkaroon ng membrane potential would be 2 potassium molecules. Okay? So maiintindihan nyo naman siya more likely with the animation, no? Ayan. But there's always a phosphate there that's causing the signal to open. Yun yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina na there are some molecules that are needed for the proteins to react, no? Na para mag-open ka or mag-move ka kasi may papasok at may kailangan lumabas. Okay? So, proteins are actually crucial to the membrane function kasi hindi lang naman siya for transport or whatever. So, proteins are also important when it comes to the structural support of your cell, like your microtubules, your microfilaments, intermediate filaments, they are for structural support. And then for recognition, ito yung kanina na mga may receptors, no? Pwede din kasi silang mag-receive ng iba't ibang molecules. And then they can also be for communication to different cells, and then of course for transport. Okay. So another active transport example would be your exocytosis. So this is apparently the process of things being moved out of the cell, and then molecules are moved out of your cells by the vesicles. So they fuse, no? Pag yung transport vesicle, they travel going to the to the plasma membrane, and once na dumikit na siya doon, they eventually open and release the molecules, or may it be food particles or other nutrients going out of the cell. And then this is actually how many hormones are secreted and how nerve cells communicate with each other. So with the use of exocytosis. So this is an example under a microscope. Next, you also have your endocytosis. Okay, guys, pag sinabing exo, palabas. Pag sinabing endo, paloob. Okay? So, this is for large molecules moved in by the materials of the cell by one of the three forms. So, under endocytosis, you have pinocytosis, and then you have the receptor-mediated endocytosis and your phagocytosis. So if you will see your if you see the image on your screen right now, kumbaga it kinakain niya paloob. Okay? And until it pinches and then encloses into a vesicle. So for the pinocytosis, okay, it is the most common form of endocytosis, and it takes in dissolved molecules such as your molecules as a vesicle. Okay, so yeah, nakikita nyo nag-cleave until it until the vesicle can already pinch out from the plasma membrane. Okay, so si pinocytosis, guys, it is called what you call your cell drinking. Okay. Kumbaga, it is getting dissolved materials in water to be brought into the cells. Okay. So this is an example under the microscope how it looks like. And then you also have your receptor-mediated endocytosis. So this is the example naman wherein some molecules cannot go in of the cell unless there is a receiving receptor. Okay? These are some integral proteins that have receptors on their surface to recognize and take in like hormones and your cholesterols. So without those receptors, yung mga types of molecules na yun will not be able to get in. Okay? Parang sa love life lang yan, guys, diba? Kapag ka naman, kunyari may manliligaw sa'yo or may nililigawan kayo, unless somebody receives you at papapuntahin ka nila sa puso nila, hindi ka talaga makakapasok. So, ganun. It's a parang relationship, there's a relationship process that's happening with this receptor-mediated endocytosis. Kasi nga, di ba, again, molecules can be of different size, can be of different shapes, and of course, can be with different charges. Okay? So without those receptors, hindi pwedeng ipasok yung type of molecule na yun sa inyong cell. Okay? And then you also have your phagocytosis, which is on the other hand called cell eating. So it is used to engulf large particles such as food and bacteria. Okay? So this is an example of a parasite being eaten by your macrophage. Okay. Okay. So now let's go to your cell cycle. Okay, this is also one of the most important things that you should know when it comes to cell development. Of course, with the cell cycle, it is the growth and development, and it occurs in different divisions to increase the number or replace damaged or dying cells in your body. So this cell divisions involves a cell cycle. So the G1 phase includes your growth and normal metabolic roles. The interface or the so sa interface guys, G1 to G2 siya. G1S and G2. So that's the interface stage. And then sa S phase, you have your DNA replication. Sa G2, you have your growth and preparation for mitosis. And then after G2, dun na papasok si mitotic phase or the M phase, which includes your prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and your telophase. Okay? So for the human life cycle, of course, unang-una naman, there should be a production of your gametes or the gametogenesis. So for the production of the sperm cells, you have your spermatogenesis, and then you have your oogenesis for the formation of your egg cells. So you also have what you call your haploid and diploid stages. Okay? So kapag ka na-release na si sperm and si egg, of course, when they fuse, you will be able to form your zygote, and then the development of the zygote until it becomes a baby, and then you have your juvenile. Okay, of course, ito na yung sinasabi na when cells develop, they have differentiation during growth. And then of course, si juvenile, hindi naman siya forever baby. So eventually, it will develop into adults, still with the differentiation and growth during mitosis. Okay? So basically, there are two types of cells in the body. The first one, you have your somatic cells. So this pertains to the cell composing the bulk of the body, such as your nerve cells, muscle cells, kidney cells, and etc. And then the other one will be your gametic cells, which pertains to the reproductive cells such as the ova of the female and the spermatocytes of the male. And then multicellular organisms use mitosis for growth, cell repair, and cell replacement. Okay? So usually, ginagamit na yung mga for growth, cell replacement, and cell repair with the somatic cells. Siguro ang mabibigay ko na example dito sa cell repair and cell replacement would be kung kunyari nagkaroon kayo ng sugat. Okay. Kasi 'di ba guys, merong minsan may mga ibang tao na kapag ka nagkasugat sila, gumagaling naman and then parang walang nangyari. Okay. Pero meron din namang iba na kapag ka nagkaroon talaga ng injury, they tend to form keloidal cells or the keloids. Okay? So ang ibig sabihin lang kasi nun guys, 'di ba? Kunyari sa kamay, you have there you have there the specific cells for your hands. But kapag ka nagkaroon kayo ng keloid, okay, ibig sabihin hindi na yung the same na hand cells yung na-generate dun sa part ng injury. Ibig sabihin may nag-replace na ibang type of cell, which is your elastic types of cell. Kaya nagkakaroon ng keloids. Okay? So yun yung idea of your somatic cells. Again, ang 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 production ng cell sa katawan nagiging generalized, it's from generalized going to specific. So if that specific part of your body can no longer regenerate the same cell that it used to have, of course there should be a different cell that should act on it. Siyempre, kapag ka hindi gumaling ang injury mo, it will result to death, right? So ganun ginagamit yung doon napapasok yung idea of the growth, cell repair, and cell replacement. Okay, hindi pwede kasing ipagpipilitan mo na same cell dapat yung nandun. Pero hindi kasi ganun lahat ng tao, di ba? Meron tayong iba't ibang genetic code and our body functions differently as well. Okay? So for the cell genetic content, each human cell except the sperm and the egg contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, so that will be a total of 46. And the sperm and egg contains 23 chromosomes in total. So one pair of the chromosomes are the sex chromosomes, which consists of two X chromosomes if the person is female, or an XY chromosome if the person is a male. Okay, XX kapag ka female, and then XY kapag ka male. So the cells go through two basic phases. Again, you have the interphase and then your mitosis. So in the interphase, you have the G0 phase, or under it the normal cell functions. The G1 phase is the growth 1 phase, which prepares for cell division and continually imbibes water and nutrients. You also have the S phase for the synthesis phase, where DNA replication happens, and then the G2 phase for growth 2 phase for the RNA and protein synthesis to happen. Okay. After that, of course, you already go with mitosis. Okay, so for the cell division. So for mitosis, this is for your somatic cells, and then meiosis, this is actually the process wherein your gametic cells are being reproduced. Okay. So for mitosis, the first one, you have your interphase. This is the time between cell divisions in DNA is found as thin threads of chromatin in the nucleus. So this is wherein the DNA replication occurs during this phase, and other organelles other than the nucleus duplicate during the interphase. So kung papansinin nyo maigi guys, yung chromatin niya are parang coils lang, no? Kapag nasa interphase pa siya. Pero kapag kadating ng prophase, if you will see the difference, you will already be seeing their chromatids, which are already your chromosomes. Kumbaga yung inyong chromatins are already developed into chromatids to form your chromosomes, and then you'll be able to see there now your spindle fibers, your astral fibers. Okay. So in the prophase, the chromatin condenses into your chromosomes, and the centrioles move the opposite ends of your cell. Again, si centriole, it actually aids in the process of mitosis, if you remember. Okay? And then, next, yung mga chromosomes na yun, kung kanina, si chromosome, meron pa siyang balot sa prophase, pagdating sa metaphase, wala na. Nawala na yung membrane na, hindi na siya membrane bound. And eventually, in the metaphase, nag-aano na sila, nag-a-align na yung mga chromosomes in the center part of your cell. And then your spindle fibers are already attached in the kinetochores, which are found in the opposite sides of your cell. So, for the anaphase naman, so from chromatids, kung mapapansin nyo kanina, di ba, yung chromosomes, X yung formation nila. But with the anaphase, they already separate yung, kumbaga, yung upper end and lower end nila, nag-separate na. Okay? And then, they are being attracted to the separate poles. Okay? So, yung mga naghiwalay ng mga chromosomes na yan, they are identical in the genetic code. So, parehas na parehas sila. It's just that they are being separated, and then they are being attracted to the different poles of your cell. And then, next you have your telophase. Ito na yung tignan nyo na nagkaroon na ulit ng membrane, yung mga chromosomes, and then there's already the presence of the nuclei and your nuclear envelope. Okay? So, kapag ka meron na siyang parang cleavage, that's what you call now your cytokinesis, or the cleavage furrow. Okay? Sa telophase pa lang makikita na yan. And then, the complete separation, okay, of the mitosis is already present when it already finishes the cytokinesis part. So, mitosis is complete and a new interface begins. So, kumbaga bumabalik dun sa umpisa ulit kung ano yung itsura niya. Okay? Okay. So, this one is the mitosis, or the nuclear division, and then the cytokinesis is the cytoplasmic division. So, this is the most classic example of representing how mitosis happens in plants. Okay, actually, this is a picture of the mitosis for an onion root tip, yung ugat ng onion. Okay, kasi sila yung pinakamabilis mag-grow, so sa kanila din yung may pinaka the best na representation or observation for mitosis. So there you have in number 1 the interphase, number 2 the prophase, number 3 metaphase, number 4 anaphase, 5 is the telophase, and then 6 is already your cytokinesis or the complete separation of your daughter cells. Okay? So the difference of mitosis and meiosis, again, for mitosis, of course, the cell type will be somatic, and then for meiosis, it's gametic. In mitosis, there's no genetic variation kasi nga, di ba, pag mitosis, the genetic variation is just the same. But when meiosis occurs, there's already an exchange of genes during what you call your synapsis or crossing over. So I'll explain this one later. And then the product for mitosis is 2 diploid daughter cells, and then for meiosis, that will be 4 haploid daughter cells. And then for mitosis, the stage is just single. Kumbaga from isang cycle lang tapos na yung mitosis. But for meiosis, there are 2 stages. Kumbaga uulitin mo ng 2 beses yung um, yung stage ng mitosis. Ganon. So you have their meiosis 1 and then the meiosis 2. Apparently, kung anong nangyayari sa mitosis, ganun lang din naman sa meiosis. It's just that in meiosis, uulitin mo siya ng 2 beses. Okay? So in meiosis, again, ito yung tinatawag nating crossing over. Bakit nga ba nagkakaroon ng genetic variation when it comes to meiosis unlike your mitosis na parehas sila ng genetic information? Of course, when there's crossing over during meiosis, of course, this is already the recombination of your maternal and paternal genes. Okay? Kapag may exchange of genes na and then they are replicated or they are being separated, so of course, nagkakaroon tayo na tinatawag na homologous pairs. Kung mapapansin nyo guys, yung combination of the genes that have already crossed over, maybe one chromosome will have majority red part and then konti lang yung blue part, tapos yung isa naman maraming blue and then konti yung red part. And then once they undergo already the first cell division or the meiosis 1, of course they are already being replicated or separated. Okay, pagkatapos ng cytokinesis, na maghihiwalay na sila. But then again, when they enter again the second cell division wherein sister chromatids are being separated, pwedeng yung isa puro red lang, yung isa maraming red, konting blue, yung isa maraming red, maraming blue pero konting red, and then yung isa pwedeng blue lang. So ganito nangyayari yung haploid na daughter cells. Kumbaga, yung diploid, hahatiin mo pa siya sa 2, kaya siya naging 4. Okay? So that's what happens during meiosis. So these are the different stages of the meiosis. Of course, you have your meiosis 1, which are just the same. And then meiosis 2 or the equational division, which is just similar or also with your mitosis. Kumbaga, inuulit-ulit lang siya. So that actually ends my lecture for today. Do you have any questions before we go on with our other activities for today?